you through our Chapter 7 review for your final exam. And Chapter 7 was all about factoring. So you must watch this video, the part of it where I talk through some important things to remember, and then it's completely up to you if you want to continue watching for some examples. So the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to factor out the GCF. So if I ask you to factor out the GCF, you're going to find the biggest number you can divide by both of your numbers that you're given. And then you're going to find anything else that they have in common. So if they both have x's, that would be part of your GCF. If they both have two y's, then that would be part of your GCF as well. So just remember, when I ask you to factor the GCF, it's going to be in the format of your GCF on the outside, and then whatever you have left over on the inside. So in this spot is your GCF, and then everything here is what's left over. Okay? The second way that you are going to be asked to factor is to factor out difference of squares. So if you see difference of squares, you're going to think of your perfect squares. So it might be helpful to list those out. Remember, you have 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, and 100. That should be good. So if you see any of those numbers in a factoring problem, you're going to know that to find the difference of those squares, you're going to square root that perfect square that you're given. So just to give you an example, let me see. If you have x squared minus 100, in order to factor that, you're going to, whenever we factor, we have our two binomials, and you're going to find the square root of both numbers that you have. So if you split x squared perfectly, you're going to have x and x. Difference of squares problems are always plus and minus, and then the square root of 100 is 10. So that would be how you would factor a difference of squares problem. All right. The next way that you're asked to factor is just when you have a trinomial. So a trinomial, remember, is going to have two terms. So you might see something like this, x squared, let me think of this, plus, let's see, 9x plus 14. This would be just a regular unfoil type of problem. So you're going to do binomial Bob foiling backwards. So for this type of problem, you're going to find your factors of 14. They need to multiply to be this number and add to be this number. And then your answer is going to be in the form of two binomials. So you're always going to start with splitting up that x. You're going to have to determine what your signs are. If they're both addition in your trinomial, then they're both going to be addition when you factor it. And then the two numbers you can multiply together to get 14. Well, if you need to, you can list out your factors of 14. 1 and 14, 2 and 7. So the only way to add to be 9 would be 2 and 7. Alrighty? And then the last thing to keep in mind, I'm going to write a little note over here. If you're given an equation and asked to factor out an equation, just remember that you're going to factor it like normal, and you're going to have two answers. You're going to split that apart, and you're going to have two answers. Okay? So factor it like normal with two answers. Now it's completely up to you. If you feel like you want an example of each type, one of these types of problems, I'm going to walk through that now, and then you guys can go on your own pace when you're ready. Okay? Okay, so the first one I'm going to go through would be a GCF problem. So if I ask you to find the GCF, I'm going to start with this one right here. So I'm going to look for what do these numbers have in common. 6 and 2, the biggest number they have in common would be 2. And it looks like they both have a y. So 2y is going to be my greatest common factor, but you're not done after you do that. You're going to write your greatest common factor on the outside, and then you're going to figure out what's left over from each term when you factor. So if I pull 2y out of 2y, I don't have anything left, but I need a placeholder, so I'm just going to put a 1 there for now, because 2y times 1 would give me 2y. Now I'm going to look at my second term. It looks like it's an addition problem. And if I pull a 2 out of a 6, I am not going to subtract them. I'm going to divide those two numbers. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I have 3 left over. So I can check my work by doing 2 times 3, and that gives me 6. And then I pulled out a y, so I don't have any y's left, but I do have an x left. So that's how you would factor out the GCF. And to go the other way, if you wanted to distribute and figure out if you got it correctly, you should end up with this answer. Okay? The next type of problem is a difference of squares. So I'm going to go through number 5 with you. So you're going to have to spot those perfect squares, and then in order to figure out what would be factored, you're going to have 2 binomials, and you're going to take the square root of each of those terms. So if I split x squared in half, I'd have x and x and x, and then the square root of 16 split perfectly would be 4 and 4. 4 times 4 is 16. And then always with difference of squares, no matter what, you're going to have a plus and a minus. Next section is regular unfoil. So this is where we're going to look for our factors of 12. So this number at the end is what you look for your factors of. So the factors of 12 would be 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and then 3 and 4. So my job is to figure out which one of those 2 factor pairs would add to be 7. So it looks like it's going to be 3 and 4. So I'm going to split up x and x. It looks like my signs are both positive, so I'm going to have plus and plus. And then my factors to add up to be 7 and multiply to be 12 would be 3 and 4. So that's how you unfoil. And then the very last section is where you have these equations, and these are equal to 0. And it looks like I have a trinomial. So the only thing I can do with a trinomial here is what I did up here. I'm going to unfoil that trinomial. So I'm just going to look at this part right here, and I'm going to ignore that 0 until the very, very end. So I'm going to unfoil x squared minus 4x minus 12. Actually, I'm going to leave that one for you, and I'm going to try 16. So I'm going to look at this part. So I'm going to find all of my factors of 6, so 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and that's it. So if I factor that out, I'm going to split x and x. My signs are both plus. And the only way I can add to be 5 would be 2 and 3. So normally this is where you would stop, but this time it's an equation. So this is equal to 0. So your job is to find 2 answers. So this is equal to what, and this is equal to what, since it's an equation. So I'm going to set up 2 separate equations, x plus 2 equals 0, and x plus 3 equals 0. And I'm going to solve for x. So to do that, I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. So I'm left with x equals negative 2. Same thing here. I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides to solve for x. So I'm left with x equals negative 3. So when you have equations, you should have 2 separate answers after you factor. All right, good luck with this chapter.